What's going on, guys? In today's video, we'll be going over the most difficult speedruns on the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. The object of any speedrun is to complete the game as fast as possible, no matter what category or requirements are in play, and this has led to some very technical gameplay on part of the runners to push times even lower. So today, we're going to look at the top 10 most difficult Super Nintendo speedruns and what makes them so tough. Super Ghouls and Ghosts is part of the Ghosts and Goblins series, a notoriously punishing casual game for the relentless platforming pitfalls and two-hit death mechanic that has you start over from the last checkpoint once you've been killed. Due to death bringing you back to the start, the run punishes mistakes very heavily. If you're hit while wearing armor, you shed your armor and continue the run in your underwear, with the next hit bringing death. You can pick armor back up during the run, and even upgrade the armor so it guards against projectiles, but enemy hits will always destroy it. The big addition to this game in the Ghosts and Goblins series is the inclusion of a double jump mechanic, which is used constantly during the run to optimize jumps and avoid enemies. The difficulty of the jump is twofold as well, because once you start a jump, you're committed to it and are unable to change or influence the direction, so for double jumps, you better be sure you know where you're going. And speaking of enemies, they're what will kill most of the runs in this game. Take level 1 for example. There are 4 main enemies you will encounter here: zombies, wolves, fire demons, and skull towers. Each of these enemies have random spawn points, which means they can come from anywhere, and zombies have a long animation with the coffin coming out of the ground. And sometimes the coffin decides to hover in the air in front of you, which stops your progress completely. The wolves jump randomly and do a high or low jump, and the fire demons begin their pattern on a whim, leaving everything up to reaction instead of anticipation during this run. Then you have this part of level 3, where red killers charge at you from the lava when you're trying to go down a ladder. You can wait and pass safely at the cost of time unless you have a shield which can absorb a projectile hit. But the problem with red killers is that they move so fast, sometimes they can clip Arthur's hitbox before they die to the shield, which takes your armor anyway. And then there's this platforming section in level 3 which is also very precise, and the platforms you're jumping to have hitboxes as well that can kill you while doing this very optimized strat, and well, I could go on, but you get the point. Tight platforming with random enemies and an unforgiving death system make this game one of the hardest to complete in a speedrun. Chrono Trigger is the fastest speedrun for an RPG on this top 10, coming in just under 3 hours, but that doesn't speak to the difficulty of the run. Like the other RPGs on this list, it has enemies in the overworld which puts an emphasis on movement to avoid unwanted fights, and in addition to that, every fight you take is manipulated to go in your favor with the exception of 2, the slime fight in the factory, and the R-Series fight, since it would waste time to manipulate it otherwise. Looking at some of the movement, a lot of it involves knowing the patterns that enemies in the overworld move in, and then optimizing your movement accordingly. Take the Beetle Room for instance, where you avoid hitting 2 of the enemies by a couple of pixels, and unlike Earthbound, if enemies hit your party members, a battle doesn't start, only if your lead party member is hit do you start a fight. Another tight movement trick is the stairs leading up to the Aussie fight. The enemies are possible to skip if you hold up and slide along the wall to the next section each time. Due to how NPC hitboxes work in this game, if they are going to move into a character, they move around them instead, and this is true for enemies as well. So for the outlaw bird you see on the stairs that the runner waits for, they're just waiting for the bird to move far enough that they can squeeze by without triggering a fight. Taking any of these fights adds a ton of time onto the run, so precision is required. As I mentioned earlier, every fight except for 2 are manipulated in the course of the run. So let's get a briefer on RNG and then look at the Dragon Tank fight to get an idea as to how this works. RNG in Chrono Trigger is tracked on a value that goes from 0 to 255. Taking a fight advances the RNG a certain amount depending on the encounter, and actions taken by enemies or your party will advance it by 1 for physical attacks and 2 for magical attacks. Additionally, enemies will sometimes wander around the battlefield, which also advances RNG, but there are strats to deal with this. There are also some more intricacies around RNG involving critical hits that I won't cover right now, so let's have a look at the Dragon Tank fight. With Dragon Tank, you want to attack his head only when animations are playing. So when you add your first attack with Chrono to the queue, you don't want to add it until Dragon Tank is in an animation, like when it repairs itself or attacks. Any animation will do for this fight, so Luca can add her attacks to the queue while Chrono is attacking. The reason we need to attack during animations is to keep your timing consistent and reduce the chance that enemies wander and advance the RNG. A Link to the Past, No Major Glitches, is a speedrun that most people are familiar with because it's garnered a huge fanbase and community, and the run can be broken down into requiring 2 skills from its runners: good movement and knowing the boss strats and how to execute them. Let's have a look at a couple bosses, Armos and Aghanim. The Armos fight is the first boss you'll encounter in the game, and consists of 6 Armos Knights that take 3 arrow shots each in order to kill. To set it up, you need to shoot 5 arrows at the start, 3 arrows to kill one of the knights, and 2 to bring one close to death before they start spinning. Once they start spinning, you need to move to the top left and start shooting arrows, making sure to kill the previous injured Armo last to avoid him going into phase 2, which resets his HP to 0. If phase 2 is engaged, the Armos turns red and starts jumping around, trying to jump on the player. This greatly increases the window in which you can damage the Armos and adds a lot of time onto the fight. Aghanim isn't a hard boss, but he has a unique ability of being one of the largest gatekeepers in speedrunning. More runs have died to Aga than RNGesus has granted prayers during speedrunners' darkest hours with RNG-dependent sections. He is the OG gatekeeper for all speed games. This is due to his projectile spell. Normally when he shoots it, you position and reflect it back at him with a sword swing in order to damage him. Do this 6 times and you're off to the races in Dark World. The problem comes with every projectile spell Aga shoots after the first in each phase, as they have a 50-50 chance of dissipating on hit. Aga's phases happen in 5 parts. The first part is always a reflectable spell, with the next 3 shots being a 50-50 chance of the projectile disappearing on reflection, and then he does a lightning attack before resetting the phase. Every blue ball Aga sends adds 6 seconds onto the fight, and if you don't get 6 shots on him within the first 2 phases, he'll do another lightning attack which adds another 6 seconds to the fight. Looking at the leaderboard, the top 3 times all have 0 blue balls, and the top 2 times are within a second of each other, meaning that a blue ball either way changes the leaderboard. For A Link to the Past, the biggest difficulty factor isn't the psychological determination to constantly reset runs at Aga, but the movement optimization required to achieve a top time. Have a look at the comparison between some rooms in WQ's world record and another top 20 runner. You'll see minor improvements on WQ's side over the other runner, and this takes time to grind out as he's essentially fighting for 10 to 15 frames per room, but that adds up over the course of an hour and 30-minute run. Take Ganon's Tower for instance, where enemy AI patterns require the utmost precision and timing during a live run. Just looking at the world record, you'll see that he lost 20 seconds in Ganon's Tower alone, all due to the difficulty of the movement required for perfection.
Oh, I did it, dude! Holy shit, I fucking PB, dude! Dude, I don't care that I chuck, who cares, dude? It's still a PB. Nice, dude. Fucking great. Finally, I can't believe it, dude. Jeez. Jesus Christ. I mean, hey, that's why you're supposed to be minus 31 at Swamp. It's to make up for the chokes, the inevitable chokes.
Super Mario RPG is one of the most beloved RPGs on the Super Nintendo. Like Earthbound, it has enemies in the overworld, and the combat system is completely different, with a larger reliance on items during the speedrun and a special attack in the battle system called the Super Jump. The battle system for Super Mario RPG was different than most turn-based RPGs. Instead of selecting an attack and seeing how it does, you have the added mechanic of timing your attacks for more damage, and the same is true for special attacks and defending against most enemy attacks. Press a button at the right time for increased outgoing damage or decreased incoming damage. The Super Jump is the epitome of this mechanic, allowing you to string together 100 consecutive attacks by timing your button presses. The first 13 super jumps you perform have a wider window of frames for you to successfully hit the input to continue the attack, with each success narrowing the window. From the 13th jump onward, you have 3 frames for a successful hit that will continue the chain. Super jumps are a great tool for killing bosses while underleveled and factor into the run in a big way. Near the end of the run, you have multiple bosses that require 100 super jumps to defeat. With a failed attempt at super jumps, likely end of the run due to a game over or significant time loss for needing to repeat the chain. Aside from avoiding enemies in the overworld and optimizing movement, the freebie mechanic is one that runners need to rely on in order to achieve top times in the game. The freebie mechanic occurs after using an item during a battle. Once an item has been used, there is a chance that it freebies, which returns the item to your inventory, allowing you to use it again. While there is no way to manipulate freebies in a run, the mechanic has become integral to achieving a top time. Take the Axum Rangers fight for example. There are 4 different strategies for completing the fight, depending on what items you have in your inventory, based on freebies from previous encounters. Runners at the top level are required to know all of these strategies for all of the bosses, as consulting a chart on the fly would take valuable time away from a speedrun.
It's over! It's over! It is over! It is over! Final running! It is over! The grind is over! I am the best in the world at this game!
Super Mario World is usually the first game everyone that grew up with a SNES played since it shipped with the console in North America. And being that it's a Mario game, there's no doubt that it has a technical speedrun, with 2 sections we should look at: the glitch setup in Vanilla Dome 1 and the execution required in Larry's Castle. Vanilla Dome 1 involves a glitch that affects the game's memory and allows you to duplicate a block and spawn the Yoshi wings to exit the level early. The trick is very technical and involves a 2-frame block duplicate. To set it up, you need to dismount Yoshi and grab the shell without being in flight, and then kick the shell in a certain position. After this, manipulate which blocks you have spinning in order to make sure the block beneath the Yoshi coins stops spinning early, since the game can only track 4 blocks spinning at once. So adding more makes the earlier block stop spinning sooner. If you do all this correctly, you have a few more specific inputs to do before spawning the block with the Yoshi wings, triggering them, and then jumping on Yoshi to collect them and end the level early. Larry's Castle, on the other hand, doesn't involve any fancy duplicate glitches. It's just a very input-heavy section where anything but precise playing on the player's part will end up costing a run. The beginning requires you to maintain constant flight by rocking the D-pad correctly, all the while dodging ball and chains. Dropping flight or hitting any obstacle will kill the run here, as it's impossible to regain speed once flight is lost. Phase 2 of the castle has the player use the full suite of mechanics on the cape, using a cape spin jump to avoid enemies, glide through retracting pencils, and to spin blocks in order to keep top speed during this phase. Magic Koopa is one of the few RNG points in this run, as his spawns are in random locations in the castle, with manipulation not being possible after the second turn block wall in this instance due to required movement on the player's part. After that, you have 3 ducks to do at the end on the bridge beneath some pencils at top speed before the segment ends. A short fight with Larry is all that's left once you reach the door. He is much easier than the previous movement section and requires 3 chained glide jumps with the cape to defeat. Earthbound is a game with a cult following that most people know as the game that NES came from in Smash, but it also has a dedicated speedrun community. The Manip Glitchless category is a run that clocks in just under 5 hours for most runners, and around 3.5 for top level players. Glitches aren't allowed in this category unlike any percent, so clipping out of bounds and despawning sprites to get up on it simply aren't allowed. Instead, we have abuse of the game's mechanics in the form of RNG manipulation and enemy dodging, or stuttering as it's known to runners, so let's have a look at them. One of the features of Earthbound that set it apart from other RPGs is the enemies are all in the overworld and start battles when you come into contact with them instead of getting pulled into random battles like in Pokemon or Final Fantasy. With this being the case, there are some strategies players can use to avoid unwanted encounters, like kiting the crow or getting other enemies stuck on walls. One of them involves positioning the enemy off screen, which resets the spawn plate the enemy is on, which may generate an empty plate allowing you to pass, but this can take time, which brings us to the most difficult but potentially time-saving method, stuttering. Stuttering is possible due to some enemies only moving when the player is moving, making it possible to walk around them since their movement starts between the 3rd and 6th frame after they detect that the player is moving. So quick taps on the D-pad allow you to stutter around them, unlike other enemies that move towards you constantly or home in on you. In these specific spots, the use of a skip sandwich allows the player to move faster than normal, making the inputs required to dodge an enemy a little more forgiving. One such place is Magic Hand, when you're on your way to fight Ness's Nightmare. Loads of weak enemies bar your path, and lots of times despawning them will result in irrecoverable time loss. So instead we stutter, like in these example from Sirium's world record.
No way, dude.
Perhaps the most demanding and impressive feature of the Earthbound run is the RNG manipulations the players use to guarantee certain events or prohibit others from occurring. There are 3 RNG values that influence what happens during the run, referred to as RNG1, RNG2, and RNG3. RNG1 and 2 always change with each other, so when RNG1 changes, 2 will also change and vice versa. RNG1 and 2 are quite complex, with NPC movement, opening and closing the menu, characters being printed in a text box, and pressing B all advancing their values by 1. RNG3 advances with events based around the player's movement, such as crossing certain boundaries on the map, going through doors, or falling down holes, and during stationary cutscenes. Additionally, certain value changes in RNG3 will advance changes in RNG1 and 2. Of note, resetting the console brings all these values back to 0, which would allow you to continue the manip beyond these problem areas. But for the 80% glitches category, resetting and power off aren't allowed. RNG manip isn't considered a glitch since it's essentially optimal interaction with one of the game's systems, with the game currently being manipped up to the graveyard in Threed, where certain NPC movements make it impossible to track how much the values are advancing. Knowing the values is also a big part of the run, and how to properly manipulate them on the fly can be tough. Any accidental input will advance the RNG and ruin any chances you had of getting through successfully. This occurred once in a run in the 80% category, where you were allowed to reset, where the area before the final boss, Gygas, is entirely manipulated to create an optimal fight with him. Sirium hit one input too many, but due to his technical knowledge of the game, he was able to recover.
I fucked it up. I think I fixed it. Oh my god. I had to think immediately for that.
The Megaman X Trilogy on the Super Nintendo has some of the most optimized movement in speedrunning. It's so optimized that the RNG during boss fights decides if a runner will be on pace for a PB or world record at the highest level. While X1 has a sweet iceless strat and some tight wall kicks in the Kuwanger level, X2 cranks the movement optimization up to 11 with the introduction of 3 new mechanics, the strike chain, speed burner, and air dash. All 3 of these mechanics give the player additional options when it comes to movement, and the route the game is ran is dictated around the order in which it's fastest to acquire these powers. After the intro stage, you'll head straight to Wire Spun to get the strike chain. This power is very similar to the hookshot from the Zelda franchise. You shoot it in a direction you're facing, and if it hits a wall, it pulls you towards wherever it latches on faster than dashing or moving normally. Not only does this speed up movement in some areas, as you can see it happening here, but it also makes grabbing the arm upgrade in Wheelgator stage a lot easier. The arm upgrade is great to have early because it allows you to charge your powers up for added effect, and the next power we're going to get is the Speed Burner. Speed Burner normally shoots a fireball, but when charged with the arm upgrade, it causes X to dash him in the direction that he's facing, even if he's in the air. The best part is that Speed Burner counts as a separate dash, so you can dash and then use it, or air dash with a leg upgrade to use the Speed Burner for even more added distance. Already with these two powers, the movement is very complex, and the air dash you pick up in Overdrive Ostrich's level with the leg upgrade adds even more complexity. Air dash lets you jump once you're already in the air, and it's not on the same dash counter as Speed Burner, so you can use them consecutively, like in this section to get over the spikes. There's another trick the air dash enables. When paired with the upgraded Buster, it allows you to do a trick called Neon Jump, which involves some complex inputs on the controller by charging a shot, jumping, air dashing, and then jumping and pressing shot at the same time, which allows you to jump again in the air. Requiring players to switch abilities on the fly, along with the movement requirements and all the boss strats, which we didn't even look at, are why Megaman X2 makes this list. And did I mention there's a move that lets you one-shot bosses as well?
Fuck yeah, dude. That was a late split, too. Holy shit! What the fuck, dude? Are you kidding me?
Donkey Kong Country is one of the most well-known series from the Super Nintendo, with the trilogy being a fan favorite among those that grew up with it. A 2D platformer developed by Rare, the series did its best to iterate on the previous game's mechanics to create new experiences and challenges with each installment. The second game of the series, Diddy's Conquest, is by far the hardest of the three games, with Worlds 4 and 5 being notorious for their ability to steal time from players, and in the 102% category, the lost levels have some difficult tech players need to pull off in order to progress. World 4 has two big points of difficulty, in 4-1 Hornet Hole and 4-5 Mudhole Marsh, but we'll be looking at Hornet Hole exclusively here. Hornet Hole introduces a new mechanic, where players can stick onto the walls or floors that are coated with honey, making constant movement very difficult, since you need to jump to free yourself from the floors and jump with directional input to get away from the walls. The honey's effect on movement can be avoided with the animal buddy Squitter, since he can move over it without becoming stuck. But climbing doesn't become any easier, as you now need to utilize Squitter's platform web ability to create platforms for you to jump on. The restrictions on movement, along with the enemy placement, make this a level where any mistake will steal those precious save frames from a runner. World 5 has a lot of difficult levels in a wide variety, with a minecart level, a beehive level, and 3 forest levels, each with a different gimmick. Gusty Glade has strong wind forces you need to contend with as you traverse the level, pushing you in different directions, making already precise jumps fatal if mistimed. Combine the win with expert enemy placement by designer Greg Males, and you have an unforgiving level with many bottomless pits and snags to shave off seconds and kill the animals, or in this case, the monkeys. After Gusty Glade, we arrive at Parrot Shoot Panic, a level designed for you to slowly descend on our faithful animal buddy Quawks, but since this is a speedrun, we just clip past Quawks and free fall down, all the way to Web Woods. Web Woods, the last forest level in Gloomy Gulch, has two sections. One is a Kongs and one is Squitter, and if you remember anything from Squitter's last section we covered in Hornet Hole, it's more of the same, except instead of honey on the floor, we have bottomless pits, so any missed jump doesn't just lose time, it kills the run. As far as tricks go, Donkey Kong Country 2 has lots of them, but the most notable are in the lost levels, which are required for the 102% run. Invisible barrel glitches that enable you to shoot further when getting shot out of a barrel, glitching the directional movement barrel so that it never shoots you out, which allows you to zip across the level. Seriously, look at Void's reaction when he hits that trick. And who could forget about Scrolly Scroll and Jungle Jinx? All of these glitches make Animal Antics, one of the hardest levels casually, seem like a constant stream of enemies all lined up perfectly for you to jump over with Rambi. There's a reason Super Metroid is on this list. The movement required to get through the different rooms and areas is incredibly optimized when going for a top time, with the difference between a world record level run and a top level runner being only a few frames. Aside from good movement, which we'll get back to in a second, there's also ammo management. In Super Metroid, you have 3 different types of ammo to track: missiles, super missiles, and super bombs. Certain parts of the run require you to use different ammo to complete it optimally, but you don't always have the full amount you need. Sometimes you miss shots, or need to use ammo to clear mobs that refuse to get out of the way. All of these situations affect how you approach certain bosses and encounters. Take the Ridley fight for instance. There are 2 different strats you can use in this fight, and another strat depending what order you do the bosses in. We'll be focusing on the any percent PRKD route, which just stands for Phantoon, Ridley, Kraid, and Dragon. In this route, you have two options to fight Ridley. The more standard fight, which uses a charged beam attack in combination with super missiles to bring him down, and the other known as the X Factor strategy. X Factor is a favorite of the runner known as Zost, which uses the wave shield to deal damage to Ridley. This strategy is more volatile, as it can lose you more time if done incorrectly or RNG isn't in your favor, but it has the chance to save more time than the standard strat if execution and RNG are on point. This strat requires you to have at least 3 power bombs when entering the Ridley fight, as doing less than 3 X Factors won't save time over the normal strat. There are a few rooms I'd like to highlight for the complexity and movement Super Metroid can offer runners. Attic and the Turin section of the game are two such places. Attic especially has a number of things that can go wrong, with multiple backup strats existing for runners of all levels, since it's expected for something to happen to cost the runner time in this section. For these reasons, Super Metroid has earned the second place spot on this list, and without further ado, let's have a look at number 1. If you thought anything but Yoshi's Island was taking the first place spot, you thought wrong. The optimized jumps required to maintain speed, along with the egg shots you need to do in order to hit enemies out of the way and collect items in the 100% category, keep this game demanding nothing but pristine play in its 2.5-hour speedrun. And that's not to mention the run-ending glitches you need to perform in order to achieve a top time. Take level 2-5 for instance. Just look at what runners have to do in order to progress as fast as possible. Bounced egg shots, double egg shots to hit an enemy and then collect the red coin they drop, backwards egg shots, and jumps and ground pounds between enemies. Go to the next level, and 2-6 has blind egg shots where you throw the egg before you see what you're aiming at on screen. And the game is full of sections like this, requiring you to collect all red coins, 30 stars, and all flowers in each level for the 100% category. Missing an egg shot doesn't necessarily end the run, as the time to retry is only a couple of seconds, but this can compound over the course of a run, with just 10 missed shots adding up to between 40 and 60 seconds lost depending on where it occurs. The worst thing that can happen besides falling in a pit is getting hit by an enemy, because this causes Baby Mario to float away from Yoshi, requiring the player to make contact before the timer runs out and he's captured, ending the level, not to mention the crying. Yoshi's Island has its share of skips and tricks as well. Piranha Plant can be beaten before Kamek flies over and makes him grow, but that's intended and it's just a secret hidden for you to find out. So let's look at the 5-4 skip instead. 5-4 is a huge time save, but also a run ender if it's not executed properly. It occurs late in the run, meaning all the time you've worked to save can be for nothing if the trick isn't performed properly. Normally you hop on board of this guy at the start and use his platform to navigate the level. But by exploiting the hover by tapping the button within a certain frame window, you won't lose height and fall into the pit. Getting the hover correct doesn't complete the trick for you, however. You also need to kite some of the bats down to your level so you can jump on them and gain height to get up to the platforms and exploit the spawn system to farm red coins. That's just a handful of the demanding gameplay and tricks you need to pull off in Yoshi's Island for the 100% speedrun, with many more that cement it as the hardest speedrun on the Super Nintendo. Thanks for watching, and if you're interested in any of the games, go give the runners a follow, and check them out on Twitch. If you like this video, check out my Discord. You'll get a sneak peek at videos I'm working on, and we're always talking about speedrun content. Until next time.